I found out my wife was cheating on me because of something my 6-year-old son said over dinner. Not because I checked her phone. Not because I hired anyone. Not because I caught her in some dramatic moment. Just one casual sentence from a kid who had no idea he was destroying my life. This happened about 4 months ago, and I still replay that moment in my head all the time, like maybe if I had heard it differently, I'd still be living in the version of my life I thought was real. For context, my wife and I had been married for 8 years. We have one son together, Noah, who had just turned 6. He's one of those kids who talks non-stop when he's comfortable, about dinosaurs, school, snacks, things he invents in his head, whatever. He's bright, funny, and the kind of kid who says things with total confidence even when he has no idea how important they are. At the time, I thought my marriage was strained, but not broken. If I'm being honest, things had been off for a while. My wife, Emily, had gotten distant over the past year. She was more protective of her phone, more irritable, less affectionate. She started going out more with friends from work and got weirdly defensive if I asked basic questions like where she'd been or when she'd be home. But every time I brought it up, she had an answer ready. I was being insecure. I was reading too much into things. I was trying to control her. At some point, when someone repeats that often enough, you start questioning your own instincts. So I did what a lot of people do when they don't want to face the ugly possibility in front of them. I accepted explanations that didn't really make sense because they were easier than the alternative. Then one Tuesday evening, everything changed. I had gotten home a little before 7. Emily was in the kitchen, and Noah was already at the table coloring while we waited for dinner. It was a pretty normal night. Pasta, garlic bread, one of those quiet family evenings that feel almost aggressively ordinary in hindsight. Emily seemed tired but normal. Noah was in a talkative mood, which usually meant dinner would take forever because every bite came with a story. At one point he started talking about his day at school, then switched to telling us about how one of his classmates lied about having a pet snake. Then, completely out of nowhere, he looked at me and said, "Dad, are you gonna meet Mom's friend who sleeps here?" I laughed at first. Not because it was funny, but because my brain didn't process it fast enough. Emily did. I saw her face change instantly. It was subtle if you weren't looking for it. Her fork stopped halfway to her mouth. Her shoulders went stiff. Her eyes snapped to Noah, then to me. I turned to him and said, "What friend?" Noah shrugged and went back to coloring for a second like he hadn't just detonated a grenade in the middle of our kitchen. Then he said, "The tall one." Emily cut in immediately. "Oh my God," she said with this forced little laugh. "He means Jason from next door. Remember when Jason came by to help with the garbage disposal?" I remember just staring at her. Jason had come over once, in the middle of the afternoon, for maybe 10 minutes. Noah knew who Jason was. More importantly, Jason had absolutely not slept here. I looked back at Noah. "Buddy, what tall friend?" He frowned, trying to explain something he thought was obvious. "The one who comes when you're at work." There are moments in life where you physically feel the world shift under you. Not metaphorically. Actually physically. Your skin gets cold, your stomach drops, and for a second you're not fully inside your own body. That was one of those moments. Emily put her fork down a little too hard. "Noah," she said sharply, "what are you talking about?" He looked confused by her tone. "Your friend." Then he smiled in that innocent way kids do when they think they're helping. "The one who sleeps in your room." I don't think I breathed for at least 5 seconds. Emily stood up so fast her chair scraped against the floor. "Okay," she said, too brightly, "that's enough weird talk for dinner. Noah, go wash your hands. You got marker all over them." He looked down at his hands, saw a little blue smudge, and ran off without any resistance. The second he was out of the room, I looked at my wife and said, very calmly, "Who sleeps in our room?" Her expression changed from panic to irritation so quickly it almost impressed me. "Are you serious right now?" she asked. "Yes. He's 6. And kids say random things." I kept my voice level. "He said a tall man comes over when I'm at work and sleeps in our room." She folded her arms. "Or he said something that made sense in his head and you're twisting it into some disgusting accusation." There was that word. Disgusting. Like I was the one bringing filth into the conversation. I wanted to believe her. I really did. Not because her explanation made sense, but because the other option was unbearable. "Still," I asked, "has anyone been in this house when I'm not here?" She gave me a look of total contempt. "Yes. Delivery drivers. My sister. The plumber 6 months ago." Do you hear how insane this sounds? Insane. That word came up a lot anytime I got too close to a truth she didn't want to discuss. I said, "You know that's not what I'm asking." She shook her head, collected plates from the table, and said, "I'm not doing this. Not based on something a child said between talking about dinosaurs and garlic bread." That should have ended the conversation, at least for the night. But something inside me had already changed. Once you hear a kid say, with total confidence, that your spouse has a friend sleeping in your room while you're gone, you can't unhear it. After Noah went to bed, I brought it up again. I tried to be measured. Calm. Adult. I said I wasn't accusing her of anything, but I needed her to take seriously how bizarre that sounded. She got angry almost immediately. She said I was trying to use our son as a weapon against her. She said I was sick for hearing something like that and turning it sexual. She said if I trusted her so little, maybe the real issue was me. It went in circles for almost an hour until eventually she started crying and saying she felt emotionally unsafe talking to me when I was in this state. That phrase hit exactly the way she intended it to. It made me feel guilty for even asking. Like somehow I was the aggressor. So I dropped it. Or at least I pretended to. The next few days, I watched. That's the thing about suspicion once it turns real. Suddenly your memory starts pulling forward every moment you brushed aside before. How she had started doing her makeup even on days she claimed she was just staying home. How she changed the sheets more often, but usually on weekdays when I wasn't around. How Noah had once mentioned that Mom's friend didn't like cartoons, and I had assumed he meant some woman from her office visiting for coffee. How sometimes when I came home, the house smelled freshly aired out, like someone had opened windows in a hurry. And once I started paying attention, I saw even more. Her phone was never out of reach. She had begun taking calls outside. She started asking me weirdly specific questions about my schedule, especially if I was working late. On Friday, I left for work like normal. Then I parked 3 streets over and waited. I hated myself for doing it. I felt pathetic. Sneaky. Like I was becoming the kind of husband I never wanted to be. But around 10:40 a.m., a dark gray SUV pulled into our driveway. A man got out. Tall. I couldn't see his face clearly from where I was, but he walked to the front door like he'd done it before. He didn't knock. The door opened almost immediately, and he went inside. I just sat there with both hands gripping the steering wheel so hard my knuckles hurt. Even then, some part of me was still trying to come up with a harmless explanation. Contractor. Relative. Friend. Anything. He stayed for almost 2 hours. When he finally came back out, he was adjusting his shirt collar and looking down at his phone. That was all I needed to see. I didn't storm the house. I didn't confront them dramatically. I drove away because I suddenly realized Noah was inside. That was the part that made me feel sickest. Not just that she was cheating. Not even that she was doing it in our home. But that our son was there. Watching some strange man come and go enough times to think of him as mom's friend who sleeps here. I called in sick for the rest of the day and sat in a grocery store parking lot trying not to throw up. When I got home that evening, she acted perfectly normal. That almost broke me more than the affair itself. She asked how my day was. She kissed me on the cheek. She told me Noah had been cranky after school and didn't want to eat his apple slices. I looked at her and thought, who are you? That night, after she fell asleep, I checked the family tablet we mostly used for streaming and games for Noah. Her email had been logged into it months earlier, and she must have forgotten. That's how I found the hotel confirmations first. 3 of them. All weekday afternoons. All in the same town 20 minutes away. Then I found emails from a restaurant reservation app. Lunches. 2 people. Times that matched the days she told me she was running errands or helping her mom. But the worst part wasn't the bookings. It was one email thread buried between store promotions and school newsletters. A forwarded message with the subject line. Can't wait to see you again. It was from a man named Aaron. The email itself was short. Still thinking about Tuesday. Wish I could have stayed longer, but your little guy was starting to ask questions. My whole body went numb reading that. Your little guy. Starting to ask questions. I took pictures of everything with my phone. The next morning, I called my sister and asked if Noah could stay with her that weekend. I told her Emily and I were having a rough patch and needed to talk. She must have heard something in my voice because she didn't ask questions. She just said yes. On Saturday afternoon, after Noah left, I put the printed hotel confirmations and screenshots on the kitchen table. When Emily came in and saw them, she stopped dead. It was one of the few honest reactions I got from her in the entire marriage. Not sadness. Not remorse. Recognition. She knew exactly what I had found. For a few seconds, she said nothing. Then she exhaled and sat down like she was tired, like this had all become inconvenient. How long? I asked. She didn't answer. How long has he been coming into this house around our son? Still nothing. So I said his name. How long, Emily? Her eyes flicked up at me. You went through my stuff. That was her first response. Not denial. Not apology. Not shame. You went through my stuff. I laughed, and it came out ugly. Our son knows him. She closed her eyes. Our 6-year-old knows your affair partner well enough to mention him at dinner. She whispered, keep your voice down. That made something in me snap. Keep my voice down. I said. He knows a man sleeps in our room. She started crying then, but even that didn't move me the way it might have once. Because now I knew she had lied so calmly, so repeatedly, while our child was being folded into her secret life without even understanding it. Finally she said, it started 8 months ago. 8 months. Almost a year of lies. I asked if Aaron was married. She nodded. That somehow made it even filthier. I asked how many times he'd been to the house. She said, I don't know. Which meant many. I asked if it had happened while Noah was there. She didn't answer, which was an answer. Then she started trying to explain. She said she had felt lonely. She said we had grown apart. She said Aaron made her feel seen. She said she never meant for Noah to notice anything. That was the line that really got me. As if the issue was simply that our son had noticed. Not that she had done it. Not that she had normalized another man's presence in the home where our child was supposed to feel safe. Notice. Like the problem was visibility. I told her I wanted her out of the house. She asked where she was supposed to go. I said she should ask Aaron. That ended the crying for a second. Her face changed, and I could tell from that look alone that Aaron had probably been enjoying the fantasy of a married woman in secret, but not the reality of taking responsibility for her. She went to her mother's house that night. The next week was a blur of lawyers, paperwork, and horrible conversations. My sister came over a lot. My parents found out. Her family found out. And somewhere in all of that, I had to figure out how to be normal for Noah. That was the hardest part. He kept asking why Mom was sleeping somewhere else. Why I looked sad. Why we weren't having dinner together. One night while I was putting him to bed, he said, "Did I say something bad?" I felt like someone had driven a knife straight into my chest. I sat on the edge of his bed and asked why he thought that. And he said, "At dinner. When I talked about Mom's friend." I asked him why he thought it was bad. He looked down at his blanket and said, "Because after that everybody got weird." I told him the truth in the only way a 6-year-old could carry it. I said, "No, buddy. You didn't do anything bad. You told the truth, and grown-ups are supposed to tell the truth too." He nodded like that made sense, but I could tell he still felt uneasy. Then he asked, "Is Mom's friend not allowed here?" I said, "No." He was quiet for a second, then said something I still think about almost every day. "Okay. I didn't like him." I asked why. And Noah said, "Because he acted like I was annoying." That was when I had to turn away for a second so he wouldn't see my face. Because out of all the betrayal, all the lies, all the humiliation, that detail was somehow one of the worst. Some strange man sitting in my house, sleeping in my bed, and seeing my son as an inconvenience. The divorce is in progress now. Emily still tries, even after everything, to frame what happened as complicated. She says she made mistakes. She says she didn't mean for anyone to get hurt. But this doesn't feel complicated to me. Complicated is forgetting an anniversary, arguing about money, drifting apart because life gets hard. This was calculated. This was repeated. This was a woman inviting another man into our home while our child was there, then looking me in the face and calling me insane for reacting to the truth. The thing that keeps haunting me is how close she came to getting away with it even longer. If Noah hadn't said that one sentence over dinner, I probably would have kept doubting myself. I would have kept accepting her explanations. I would have stayed in that fog where you know something is wrong but keep letting yourself be convinced that you're overreacting. Instead, my son told the truth because he was too young to know it was supposed to be a secret. And that's how I found out my wife was cheating on me. Not from a text. Not from lipstick. Not from a hotel bill. From my little boy, who thought he was just talking about Mom's friend.